What's up, Big 12 Nation? It's Tuesday night in America. That can mean only one thing. It's election night. Gasp! But also, it is time for another edition of your favorite Big 12-centric, YouTube-focused talk show. That's right. It's the Biggest 12 with me, your host, Clint Foster. Hope you voted because now it's out of our hands. And let's talk about a little bit of college football because, that's going to be a lot more fun than anything else that's going on. But before we get to that, and before we get to the awesome lineup of guests slash, I'm just now going to call him my co-host, Brownie, who's here again. I need some things from you. All right. First of all, to the show at Big 12 Voice of College Football. There it is right there on the bottom of the screen. Hit like, hit subscribe, ring the bell, do the things. I need you to do all the things. Let's grow the show. Let's make it an international phenomenon as the Republic burns around us, right? And also, please do follow me on Twitter at Clint_Foster55 and on YouTube at Clint Foster Comedy. That one right there. Okay. Hopefully I'll have a new YouTube video for you soon. Okay. I'm keeping my allow me to bring in my three guests tonight to talk Big 12 football, all things Big 12 football. That's right. I got Brownie back. I got Flatland Sports, him from Twitter, and Ralph Amsden. What a crew. Gentlemen, how are we doing on this election eve?
It's a wild.
Doing phenomenal. Not worried about anything.
Whatever happens wasn't my fault, so I'm good.
Amen. Hey, but you're the only one of us in a swing state, though, Ralph, if I'm not mistaken, right?
That is true. That is true. If you're in North Carolina or Arizona and your candidate loses by one, might be my fault. But I'm counting on that not happening.
All right, perfect. So Ralph is more liable than the rest of us as far as this is concerned. All right, but great. So let's just go ahead and get into this. I want to talk about the big news that came out today. No, it's not Peanut the Squirrel. I'm talking about the college football playoff rankings that just went live. I'm going to get them up on the screen here in just a moment. And I want to know y'all's takes on where the Big 12 fell. So obviously, we've got BYU claiming the top spot among Big 12 teams. I mean, hey, we're all Cougars this day and age, right? Even the Utah folks, because that's who's carrying the banner, right, for us. If we can get this thing to pull up, good Lord. 2023. What's wrong with you, internet? Come on. All right, here we go. So, top rated team in the top 25. BYU comes in at 9. Then we've got Iowa State filing in at 17. Cyclones did not drop out of the top 25. Then Kansas State 19, Colorado 20. And that rounds out the top 25 for the Big 12. So, what are y'all's thoughts on our, banner carriers here in the college football playoff rankings?
I personally think that BYU is a little bit low. Yes, they're undefeated. You can always argue strength of schedule, all that other shenanigans. But when you see the rest of the teams that are ahead of them, you're looking at Indiana, Tennessee, Penn State, and Texas combined. All 4 of those schools have beaten a top 25 team just once all season. BYU has 2. SEC rankings. Just saying.
The Big 12 slander is very real. I was surprised that BYU was in the top 10. I was kind of expecting them to hang out at number 12 or 13.
Well, the loss, Notre Dame losing to NIU at home obviously doesn't matter because they've gone on to win the rest of their games so far.
Quality losses.
It was a very quality loss.
Yes.
Yeah. Perennial blue blood NIU. If that was BYU with that loss, I mean, they would have been disqualified from like the next 5 college football playoffs, I would assume.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's kind of what we really have to talk about here is Big 12 teams in the top 25. You have Iowa State that just came off a loss to Texas Tech and honestly really didn't look that good. You had Kansas State lose an extremely close one last weekend, and Colorado, I guess, is on the up and up, but they had those two really questionable games at the beginning of the season before they learned how to play football. So it's really what team, if you are in the Big 12, are you rooting for? Because you could almost guarantee another loss in any of the rankings for Iowa State, Kansas State, or Colorado just nullifies there being two Big 12 teams in the college football playoffs.
Yeah.
What I think is interesting about the initial rankings is BYU seemingly, and yeah, being undefeated is a big help right now for anybody. They're the lowest ranked undefeated team, though. So it's pretty evident that they're not getting a ton of respect. But what's interesting to me here is Notre Dame being at 10 and SMU being at 13. Notre Dame is getting credit for beating a Louisville team that SMU also beat. And SMU has a 3-point loss pre-quarterback switch to BYU. So I think the understanding was always that the Big 12 and ACC was going to get the short end of the stick. But you look at and I understand that Kansas State beat Colorado, but you look at Colorado at 20, and I know nobody in the Big 12 is like jumping up and down to root for Colorado to represent this conference. But I think Colorado is one of the only teams out there that hasn't allowed a 300-yard passer. They haven't allowed 200 yards rushing in a single game. They're like defensively, what nobody's talking about right now is the massive leaps and bounds. The defense is actually carrying this team with their addition at defensive coordinator from the Cincinnati Bengals. So, I look at Colorado right now as maybe having the strongest case and kind of having their fate in their own hands here. And I look at BYU as sort of it's an offense by committee and it's an elite defense, right? And I kind of worry about them because they without the ability to depend on any one player offensively, I think they're probably the most at risk to slide, even though they're currently undefeated. I kind of look at them the way that I looked at the Iowa State going into this last week. That there just wasn't there wasn't enough meat on the bone for what they've actually accomplished. And I love that win over SMU, but it just doesn't carry a lot of weight, understanding that SMU hadn't rounded into becoming a run first team with Kevin Jennings as their primary starter.
Yeah. And you're right. The bias is so evident when you talk about BYU. I mean, the only team that SMU has lost to is BYU, and we're going to sit here and say, we're going to sit here and say that Texas has had a more impressive season than BYU. I don't think that's true. I don't think
Penn State doesn't belong. Penn State doesn't belong above any of these. They gave up 191 yards on 5 explosive plays to USC. Didn't score an offensive touchdown last week.
Yep.
They should not be at 6.
Bias. Gross. Yuck.
I also enjoyed that the Texas logo doesn't show up.
Shame on
that's awesome.
Well, and shame on the Big 12 for choosing the wrong helmet logos whenever they decided to form the 16-team conference. I mean, they got rid of the cow and the paperclip, and so now, obviously they were never going to have a chance.
Yeah.
Colorado is interesting to me because at the start of the season, they really reminded me of like the 2015 Patrick Mahomes-led Texas Tech team where you had just a generationally good quarterback, some really good receivers, and then the defense and offensive line were just not there. And they finally, I feel like in the last few weeks, learned how to play defense, which makes them really, really dangerous. Not that I'm worried, but.
Yeah, well, I definitely want to get into that Texas Tech Colorado game. That's the game that interests me the most on the schedule this week, as well as that Arizona State UCF game, which is why I wanted to have you, Ralph, and you, Flatland, on specifically this week. But before we move on to talk about what we learned about from last week, I want to make sure that I let all of y'all know about Mark Rogers' new book. It's on Amazon right now, and if you're a college football junkie like me, you're definitely going to want to check this out. Speaking of Colorado, It's called Disputed National Champions, College Football's Historic 1990s Reset. This book dives deep into the chaotic world of college football championship decisions during the 1990s. This pivotal decade reshaped the sport in unprecedented ways, leaving fans and experts alike questioning the system and legitimacy of crowned champions. Disputed National Champions also takes the outcomes of the decade and projects those results into the BCS and various playoff models in the future. It's a real fun thought experiment. It's a real good history lesson for those of you who weren't around back then before the BCS era. Highly recommend that you check it out. It's super affordable on Amazon there. Look at that. $9.99. Come on. It's almost Christmas time. That's an easy one right there. Get that for your dad, your uncle, your grandpa, yourself, whatever. Go get it one way or another. All right. So, one big takeaway. This can be about your team. It can be about anyone else in the conference. What was your biggest takeaway, gentlemen, from last week's action?
Texas Tech still alive. that was mine. I mean, that was I wonder where Iowa State would be right now if they hadn't lost. Like I wonder if they would be above BYU in this ranking. That's like the biggest what if right now. But yeah, Texas Tech has had a very manic season. And 23-22 was, I figured they'd cover, but getting that win at the end, the consistency of Taj Boyd, Iowa State's offense has looked pretty good this season, and to make enough plays on defense to come out a winner was huge. And then when Baron Morton's healthy, they're a good team, and so. I think it puts them in a position to continue to play spoiler, and it makes this weekend's game against Colorado enormous.
Yeah, massive game.
You come out of just a gut-wrenching loss to TCU on it. It wasn't really the last second because I feel like you lost that game multiple times during. But I thought it was interesting that Tech would go on to beat Iowa State running essentially the same play that they lost to TCU on with the Will Hammond fumble by just switching out the quarterback and just going Wildcat, because it was a different play, obviously, but the idea was the same, and just getting the ball in someone's hands and getting one extra blocker upfield for him, and that got him in the end zone. And of course, in Fort Worth, they ended up fumbling the ball and losing the game right then and there. But I was really happy to see the defense really step up against Iowa State, especially under those conditions in the rain and the weather.
All right, Brownie, tell us about the dumpster fire. Tell us about this.
7-5, baby. Mark it down. The entire world is just burning. Yeah, so it was just kind of a weird situation for us, and the beginning of the game went exactly how most Iowa State fans figured, and that was Texas Tech scoring on the first possession. Iowa State allowing a first possession touchdown is, I think, 7 out of 8 games right now. So if you want easy money, just put money on Iowa State allowing a first possession touchdown for the rest of the season, because it's going to happen. I think we just came in underprepared. And Iowa State, from what I was hearing, was really glad that Morton was the starter and not the freshman, because we do deal better with a more of a pocket passer presence than a scrambler or a question mark of a quarterback. The problem with us, though, for that game was the rain and the fluidity of the offense. Our offensive line couldn't hold a block to save our lives. It was the most penalties that we've had all season. And anytime that our defense came up with a big play, it got reversed or the offense didn't capitalize on it. The one major takeaway that I had is I think Darian Porter has officially put everybody on notice because he can backpedal 10 yards faster than most wide receivers can sprint forward. He also could have qualified for the NCAA track championships with his 100-meter and 200-meter times in his high school career. So he is super fast. He's 6'4". I absolutely love the man. He had a .4 rating. It did increase a little bit after this game. I think he's at like 1.8, but I mean that's still absolutely unheard of for somebody who's getting targeted as much as him. But yeah, I was waiting to save the dumpster fire for Okie State when they didn't win a single conference game this season, but this seemed like an appropriate time to bring it out.
Yeah, feels that way. Well, y'all, my big takeaway is one that it's as it has sunk in since that nightmare of a showing in the Revivalry on Saturday. It's truly shocked me, and that is I believe that Kendall Briles is having his best year as offensive coordinator in his life, and this is something that no one outside of TCU would ever notice because I don't know how TCU has scored a single point with as bad as our offensive line is. The offensive line cannot run block for anybody. They're not that great at pass blocking either. Josh Hoover was running for his life most of that Baylor game. The fact that Kendall Briles has been able to scheme an offense with any semblance of a pulse, right? Manufacture a run game with Savion Williams out of the Wildcat. Keep Josh Hoover clean enough to get some passes down the field and run routes in such a way that it gets guys open quick enough before the protection completely breaks down. It's stunning. And as much as everything about this TCU game, this TCU season has been its own version of a dumpster fire, we're still probably going to finish 7-5 and make a bowl game, and it's going to be the worst 7-5 ever because no necessary changes are going to be made, and we're going to suffer through another year of just nonsense. But I think Kendall Briles, for all of his foibles, deserves his flowers for the job that he is doing for TCU this year. My personal opinion.
Are you sure it's not having Todd Graham as a consultant?
Maybe
the thing that really puts you over the edge.
Yeah, just getting that little bit more of just like ickiness in there, right? We just want to. What can we formulate the most depraved staff possible in a lab, right? That's what we're going to try and do. Okay, so before we get into the coming week's action, a quick word from one of our sponsors here at the Voice of College Football. Voice of College
Football is even more exciting with some action on the line. And the games are even better when you're cashing in. And the Voice of College Football is the place to be to get the greatest value. Let's start with my picks. 75% against the money line, 58% against the spread. I've got a 40-year track record. In fact, in 2023, at $100 played per game, you would have netted over $9,300. And guess what? I'm just the warm-up act. Steve Merrill, our ace in the hole, show stopper from Wager Talk. 6 years with the Voice of College Football, over 30 years in the industry. Steve gives us analysis on all the big games, but you can't miss Steve's weekly under-the-radar pick, which went 21-5 against the spread the last 2 seasons. I repeat, 21-5 against the spread. You also get picks from some of our top analysts here at the Voice of College Football, including Steve Dace and Matt Zemek. Become a YouTube channel member or Patreon member for just $99 per month. Go to the main channel on YouTube, click join, and select the betting tier. Do the same thing on Patreon. Make 2024 a winner now.
All right. Let's talk about these games we have coming up in this next week of Big 12 action. We'll start with 11 a.m. West Virginia at Cincinnati. This rivalry, maybe? I don't know. Mountaineers going to play Cincinnati. I love Cincinnati. I think they're being slept on this year. I like Sorsby a lot. What do y'all feel about this game?
Sorsby's him, man.
Mm-hmm.
I think when I looked up his stats from last year, he's already accumulated more passing yards. He has the same amount of passing touchdowns, and I think he has 1 or 2 fewer picks than he did his freshman season. I think he's definitely trajecting in the right direction, and him being a sophomore right now is definitely going to be helping Cincinnati out in the future. I do think that they also have the support staff to help pull this win out, and I honestly can see them beating West Virginia by more than 5 points. I think it could be 10. But on the flip end of that, Neil Brown is fighting for his job at this point. From everything that I've been hearing and what I've been reading is if Neil Brown doesn't make a bowl game, he's done. So with that, them being 4-4 right now and looking at the rest of their schedule, finding 2 wins on that is going to be extremely complicated. And I think that they're going to come out extremely scrappy, but I don't think that they're going to be able to pull off an upset on this one.
Yeah, the moment a coach says you should come to the games just because it's fun, it's not going well.
Great week of practice.
So but Cincinnati is a really scrappy team. I mean, they came to Lubbock and took Texas Tech down to the wire, and Tech had to kick a very long last-second field goal to win that game. And at the time, Tech fans were ready to start lighting lime scooters on fire. Well, never mind. They do that for celebrating purposes. They're ready to jump off the bandwagon, and Cincinnati has really proven to be a dark horse. Not a championship contender in the Big 12, but definitely a force to be reckoned with moving forward.
Hey, you mentioned it, Flatland. This Cincinnati team, they are about a hair's width away from being a one-loss team, right?
Yeah.
If they have any semblance of clock management late in that Texas Tech game, they should be able to win that game. And the Pitt game, if you remember, they lost to Pittsburgh 28-27. That's another game that was within reach, right? So Cincinnati could be in Iowa State shoes right now, truly. What do you think, Ralph?
I love Brendan Sorsby. Arm talent, leadership, pocket presence, knows when to scramble. To me, I mean, you watch him for 60 minutes, it's a clear NFL guy. And, you know, I don't think this Cincinnati team is constructed as well as it should be 3 years out from a trip to the college football playoff. I think we all understand why. But you guys are absolutely right. West Virginia's falling apart. But back against the wall, Nico Marchiol is a guy you want. He's a dirtbag. He's a gamer. He's gritty. You know, he's not the most talented guy in the entire world, but there's not a situation Nico Marchiol is not going to go out there, give you everything he has. It just isn't enough. And I don't think it's going to be enough against Cincinnati.
All right, there we go. Let's talk about those Cyclones, Brownie. Let's get right into it. Your beloved dumpster fire. Number 17, Cyclones head to Kansas. I like the Cyclones to right the ship here. I mean, Kansas, you talk about a team that's fallen apart at the seams. I mean, Kansas, golly, I had them as a dark horse Big 12 championship contender at the beginning of the season. And I mean, these guys, they're back to good old fashioned Kansas. I mean, Brownie, are you that panicky going into this game? What are you thinking?
Honestly, I'm not. I think the primary concern for us is how we're going to deal with Jalen Daniels. Is he going to be the K-State Jalen Daniels, or is he going to be the earlier in the season throwing like 3 touchdown passes and no interceptions for 450 yards Jalen Daniels? I think last week was a piece of humble pie that we needed, and come back down to earth that our defense can't always bail us out. I also think that it showed vulnerabilities in our offense, where if you break up our rhythm, you break up our plays and force it to become down to like that last minute drive, we fall apart. I also thought it was kind of weird how we could score in 45 seconds, but we couldn't score in 1 minute and 42 seconds. I think Kansas is going to be in more of a world of hurt, because from what I've been hearing from the KU athletic department, there's going to be far more Cyclones there than there is going to be Jayhawk fans there. And if that's the case, then it's not even a home game for Kansas, and being a 3-point favorite is not going to mean anything. I do think Iowa State turns around, but, you know, Kansas had that bye week after getting absolutely obliterated during the Sunflower Showdown.
Yeah, Kansas has just been, I want to say it's surprising, but there's a part of me that just wasn't surprised. I just never could get on board with the Kansas hype just because they're Kansas. They have a fantastic head coach, and Jalen, all of a sudden the name is escaping me. Their quarterback is really good, but they just can't seem to put it together this year.
I think getting beat was probably one of the better things to happen to Iowa State. And usually you like early in the season to schedule some of your toughest opponents. that way you're not shocked. Like you know what to prepare for. And the thing about Iowa State is this is their weakest strength of schedule since 2009. And I think before they took on Texas Tech, the Power 4 opponents that they played, average rating was 102nd in pass yards per game. So they just really hadn't been tested. I think this loss to Texas Tech is it's gonna go one of two ways. Everything's gonna fall apart, or this is gonna be the thing that says, all right, like to actually be competitive, we got to be a little more serious. We got to prepare a little bit better. And Kansas, they're a decent edge rushing team and they're athletic on offense, but where it matters in the trenches, that's not something that they have to offer. I think they're going to get out physicaled by Iowa State in this game.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And looking at their schedule here, the Cincinnati game is difficult. The Kansas State game is difficult, but those are both home games, right? So Iowa State's got a real opportunity here to finish, potentially.
I just want 10 wins, man. Just give me 10 wins. Yeah. I don't care how it happens. Just give me 10.
It's there for you, Brownie. It's there for you. It really is there for you.
About 10 wins for Indiana and Iowa State, meaning the apocalypse for the rest of us.
Oh, yeah, because then you guys are going to have to start moving your goalposts.
I think there is a passage in Revelation about that. I think
something about
Farmageddon will rise. And,
That's exactly what happens when you get rid of Farmageddon, damn it.
It's going to burn the entire Midwest to the ground because there's going to be 1 year of a gap. Iowa State has a real shot, though. That Farmageddon game might very well be who gets into the Big 12 championship game type of game.
I really think that's what it's going to come down to.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Speaking of four horsemen, the Red Raiders are riding high. Now, they are riding a little uncomfortable. They're riding bareback because they don't have a saddle, unfortunately. But they're riding high going into this Colorado game. Number 21, Buffs, coming to Lubbock. They're a 3.5-point favorite. I wish this was a night game, man. I would love Texas Tech if this was a night game. I still think Tech can win this game, though.
Yeah, riding bareback, going back to our West Texas Comanche roots there. This is going to be the game I think that really kind of determines the rest of Texas Tech's season. These kinds of games, if you're a Texas Tech fan, they scare the hell out of you because there's so much hype. You've got Fox Big Noon kickoff coming. It's the Patrick Mahomes game. You've got Deion Sanders coming into town. And these are the kind of games that, regardless of how good Texas Tech seems to be, that you just kind of fall on your face. Going back to like 2013, you're ranked in the top 15, 7-1. There's whatever the version of Fox Big Noon kickoff was called back then was in town. And you just get blown out by Oklahoma State in the same circumstances. And last year you have or not last year, the year before, you have the same deal with Baylor in town, and what was a really bad Baylor team, in my opinion, that just kind of took you to town during the same circumstances with Patrick Mahomes going into the Ring of Honor. That said, this is a much better Texas Tech team than you have seen in at least a decade, going back to 2009.
Yeah,
I think Colorado matches up really well with Texas Tech. I think there's an opportunity for this thing to just be an all-out shootout. But I think if the Tech defense can kind of find a way to pull it together and just slow Shedeur down, I think the Red Raiders will come out with a win.
Oh, man, I hate to do this, but there is one way to beat Colorado, and it's defensive line pressure. And I'm pretty sure that Texas Tech is tied for last in the history of the universe in defensive line pressure. I don't think they have a defensive lineman with more than one sack. I think they have several defensive linemen that haven't had a sack yet this year. So that part scares me. I think that it's going to be tough for Colorado to slow down Texas Tech's passing attack. However, when you flip it to the other side, who is going to be covering Colorado's second and third receivers? Because Jimmy Horn Jr., I think their number 2 receiver is like one of the all career leaders in receptions in the entire NCAA. So I think the game sets up, outside of being a road game, the game sets up really well for Colorado to roll.
All right, Brownie, you're the rubber match then. You're the tiebreaker.
Oh man. I guess it kind of all comes down to the refs and how they want to ref it. Are we going to get the Patrick Mahomes
In classic
NFL
Big
refs?
12 fashion, right?
Are we going to get the Patrick Mahomes NFL refs here, where your right tackle can false start every single play and be able to get rid of the ball before anything happens? Or are we going to have another one where it's illegal hands to the face on an interception and it was actually a holding?
Well, if we do get If we do get the Mahomes refs, I can assure you that they will be 100% slanted towards Dion and the Colorado Buffaloes. There's no way they're coming and giving us any home cooking here.
Can I ask you all a question as the newbie here? Because I'm used to like Pac-12 officiating. That was my life. And
We're sorry.
I'm so sorry, man. But
Pac-12 officiating was like everything is fine, and then in the fourth quarter, one team gets a sixth down. Like things that would happen in Pac-12 are not things that exist. Like that was the whole joke about Pac-12 officiating, is that that insane things would happen in fourth quarters that were like impossible to explain, like the lights over Roswell or something. In the Big 12, every call is wrong.
Yeah, welcome to the Big 12, man.
So it's a completely different beast, because every call is wrong. But then if every call is wrong, then I guess it's right. It's been a whirlwind. I don't understand. It is objectively worse as far as the totality of the game.
Yeah.
But I haven't, and thank God for replay, because I've seen probably 10 to 12 targeting calls overturned, which is nice, but I've been just blown away by the fact that like 2 plays into the game,
we used to have a saying
somebody will blatantly
here.
false start, and then the rest will just pick up the flag and be like, "Oh, just kidding. I know you saw somebody false start, but we actually just dropped this. It was an accident."
So
did y'all
know.
Well, just wait. Basketball season's coming. It gets better.
Yeah, wait till
basketball's going to be even worse.
That's
man.
what I've heard. That's what I've heard.
And the worst.
I remember seeing
the TCU Baylor game though. Did y'all watch the TCU Baylor game?
Yeah.
There was a sequence there where Baylor had the ball down near the goal line, and they got like 17 false starts in rapid succession, and no one was moving. It was just the most bananas thing, like what you're talking about, Ralph. It's just like, I was like, okay, I mean, this helps us, so fine, but like, what is going on? Like, just unwatchable at times.
Well, even like in our game for Iowa State and Texas Tech, our tight end was an ineligible receiver downfield on 2 quick RPOs that were in the wide receiver's hands within 2 milliseconds of getting the ball. And when you watch the replay, he wasn't even out of the backfield yet when they called him ineligible downfield. I was like, okay, so was he like covered up by the receiver, or like something must have happened like in a formation? But then you would think that it was like an illegal formation or something and not an eligible receiver. No. But also, if you go back and look at the touchdown, sorry, Iowa State fans, during the UCF game, our left guard is 2 yards into the end zone when we scored that touchdown before the ball was snapped, and there was no false start on that. So, welcome to the Big 12.
I want to go back to mystery surprise call in the fourth quarter. I don't like this. Everything is wrong all the time.
Well, those Pac-12 refs were just doing what they could to get people to stay up for Pac-12 after dark. You just had to see what was going to happen in the fourth quarter.
I'm afraid that some of those unemployed Pac-12 refs ended up in the Big 12.
I remember seeing, I think it was Utah fans during the Pac-12 realignment saga who were grouching about going to the Big 12, but they're like, man, at least we don't have to deal with these Pac-12 refs anymore. And I just cackled by myself in my car when I saw that.
Wrong.
I mean, it's worth remembering, Colorado is the original beneficiary of a 5th down, right? Like back in the Big 8.
5 quarters or 5 whatever it was, 5 downs.
Yeah. So I mean, there's got to be some that they're the linchpin that's holding all of this together, right? All of this horrible officiating. between our two conferences. All right, Ralph, let's talk about something that should make you a little more happy. Arizona State hosting UCF, not having to go all the stinking way to Orlando like the Wildcats did. Man, I have been so happy with what I've seen from the Sun Devils this year since we last talked, since you were last on the show. You know, I love that coach that y'all have. I love Arizona State at home, too. Arizona State plays great at home. I like them to beat the Golden Knights here. Tell me I'm wrong, man.
There's a rumor that Cam Scatterboom might not play.
Ooh.
Well, okay, so maybe I'm wrong.
What?
That's tough. Like he kind of is the team, right? They have decent depth at running back. I don't think it'll prevent them from having an opportunity to win, but he breaks so many tackles. He gives you so many extra opportunities that, you know, if he's banged up, I guess he's got a collarbone. Sam Levitt, the quarterback's got healing from a broken rib. Their defense is going to have to be the one that gets it done. And UCF is so creative in the way that they run the ball that I can see it maybe being an issue for Arizona State. I love RJ Harvey. I think he's a fantastic player. But I tell you what, I don't understand UCF bringing in KJ Jefferson. I think at this point they're probably better off just moving on from him. It's gonna be a close one. It's gonna be a tough one. I'm kind of where it's house money. 6 wins was really the best thing that I think a lot of Arizona State fans could hope for this season. But 6 wins with a dominant running back and a very feisty defense. Very feisty. I mean, you saw it when, you know, Texas Tech got us in a 14-0 hole 5 minutes into the game. And then when the defense actually got an opportunity to play without being on their heels, they were nasty. And so my hope is that some of these tricks and gimmicks that UCF brings out aren't as effective, and that ASU's defense is disciplined. But I got to say, like, I'm 50-50 on this one because Cam Scatterboom's 50-50 on playing in the game. But if he suits up, you can guarantee they're going to give him the ball 30 times like they have every single week.
Hey, Arizona State has 6 wins, and guess who has 6 losses? Them Arizona Wildcats, man. This is like best case scenario.
Oh my God.
And you thought that it was going to be the opposite at this point too. I mean, you thought Arizona State was going to, Arizona was going to come and kind of have their way with the Big 12, and they've just fallen flat. And Arizona State, they remind me of a Cincinnati, just scrappy.
Yeah, it's been a fun year. I'm want to go to El Paso. I've never been so excited to go to El Paso in my life.
Yeah.
Give us a bowl game against some random ACC team, and we're gonna have a good time.
Well, listen, this is one of 2 games left on the schedule that I feel fairly confident for Arizona State in, excuse me. You know, not to say that you couldn't pull an upset against a BYU or a Kansas State, but those are certainly going to be a lot. I mean, Kansas State's going to be very difficult in Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
BYU, maybe you can catch BYU napping at home, right? But I mean, heck, 8 wins, first year in the Big 12. Let's freaking go. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Better
and
other 4 corner.
it's been so much fun this year, and I'm just glad they're not in the basement anymore, living, you know, playing herm ball. It was just it was such a disaster. It wasn't exciting football at all. To have a chance going into every week is really cool. To have your head coach be 34,
yeah.
It's wild. I mean, he's the first.
Dude is literally my age. He is literally my age. Like,
and he's the first coach
back from
to ever be born in the 1990s to lead his team to a bowl.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Some of those celebrations, like post-game too, when Arizona State fans ran the field, he was like celebrating just as much as the student section was. And I was like, hell yeah, dude, like, get it. And they're like, we won. And he's like, I know, let's go.
Because he was one. And someday when Brock Purdy's the head coach of Iowa State, like, you're gonna get that feeling too. It's gonna be awesome.
Right.
It's cool to have it's cool and not cool to have one of your own lead the team, because if they fail, then that means you fail. Like, because we've
been on the other side of that with Cliff Kingsbury.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. As trainers, we all think we could do this. And I host a Wednesday night Spaces, and I have for years on Twitter. Kenny Dillingham used to come to those spaces for a whole year while he was at Florida State and Oregon, sit in on those spaces and then message me afterward and be like, man, I love these fans. I want that job. And then he got it. And I was like, Kenny from Spaces is the head coach? This is insane.
Kenny from Spaces. Yeah.
That's his name now, Kenny from Spaces.
Kenny from Spaces, baby.
Yes, he's Kenny from Spaces.
That's awesome. I mean, that's TCU's situation with basketball. Jamie Dixon played for the Frogs back in the 80s and was one of the best point guards we ever had up until recent years. And now, I mean, it's funny because now expectations are higher. And it's like, oh, well, why can't we win? Why can't we win more tournament games? It's like, bro, we are in the tournament. I am able to write down TCU on my bracket. That is like cloud nine for me. I am thrilled. You know,
It's the same way with us with Fred Hoiberg.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just used to being in the bracket, so I'll sit here and watch all you little people.
All right. So
the years before Tubby Smith were pretty brutal, though. I think there was a year where Tech went like 0 and they lost like all but one of the Big 12 conference games in 2011.
I've been there. Cough, cough, Steve Prohm. Cough, cough.
No, I've spent most of my basketball fandom there. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Like, golly. Neil Doherty? Ugh. All right. So moving on to the Frogs. Oklahoma State coming to TCU. Man, this may be the most confident I've felt about a game all year outside of Long Island, which means, of course, the Frogs are probably going to find a way to screw it up. But Alan Bowman is a statue. He needs his AARP card. I mean, forget getting a real job. He needs to just like go ahead and file for Social Security. I cannot wrap my mind around why Oklahoma State is so bad with as many returning starters as they have. The cupboard was the opposite of bare. It was completely full. But here we go. Frogs have an opportunity to be bowl eligible for the first time. Well, national championship notwithstanding, first time since 2020 that the Frogs have been bowl eligible. This will actually be the first time we have gone to a regular bowl game, not the playoffs, since the 2018 Cheez-It Bowl. So what the hell is life, right? But
I was at that game.
Okay.
You were at that game? I am sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a terrible game.
Yes. A hilariously terrible game. But I like the Frogs. I mean, is there any reason that I should be horrified going into Saturday night, y'all?
No,
Well, I mean, do we really think Mike Gundy is
fire.
not going to win a game in the Big 12 this year?
I think so. I
I
think
mean,
I think
Careful.
Gundy has lost the locker room. I really do. And
Yeah.
I don't know. I really don't know what's going to happen this offseason. Like, is it going to be a conversation with the AD where, he just puts in his resignation and they move on? Is it something where they're going to have to look at his buyout? I haven't looked at his current buyout, but I'm assuming it's quite significant. Or, I mean, what else is there to do other than go out and splash a bunch of NIL money that they don't have?
I mean, which of these games could they even win, though? Because they go on the road twice. They have Texas Tech at home, and Texas Tech is peaking right now. Like, I don't think they can win any of these three games.
I don't either. I really
Except
don't.
for maybe us. Like, maybe, like if they run the ball, I mean, we can't stop a freaking nosebleed. Maybe they can run the ball against us and beat us. But,
Allie Gordon hasn't
I
looked
mean, it
good.
would be the most Big 12 thing ever for Oklahoma State to go win this weekend. But, I mean, I don't really see it either. I mean, it'd be the most Big 12 thing and the most TCU thing for Oklahoma State to go win this weekend.
yeah, I'm not kidding.
It's hard to imagine the Mike Gundy era at Oklahoma State ending this way. Just winning 9 to 10 games a season, and then all of a sudden you go 3-9.
Iowa State fans now. We haven't gotten to that 10 win yet, though.
I mean, it's not all that dissimilar from how the Gary Patterson era ended at TCU, right? I mean, this guy, he was TCU. He made TCU a winning program when TCU hadn't been since the 50s, right? And then all of a sudden, he just loses his touch, right? And you have Cheez-It Bowl devolves into losing season after losing season after losing season. And it's like at a certain point, you got to let the legend go, right? Like, hey, you got your statue on campus. There you go. But we got to move in another direction. Right?
And I think NIL is also part of it. I don't think Gundy is quite set up for NIL.
Patterson was the same way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and when you even look at it, he had what, 20 of 22 returning starters, and he was talking about roster retention and how hard it is and how he had to re-equip Okie State through NIL. I was like, bro, you have 20 out of 22 starters coming back. Like, what are you talking about where you had to go splash a bunch of cash for your starting roster? Like, you are the pinnacle of most stable program in the Big 12 right now, and you're complaining that you had to go out and get kids like that. It's absurd. It's like he's almost trying to come up with excuses on why they suck this year.
There's something else wrong though. Like it's happening over time. It's not happening in such a tight space that people can say,
Right.
"Oh, like Oklahoma State's falling apart." But Spencer Sanders leaving instead of starting, along with 17 other players before the 2023 season, being down to Arizona State at half, losing out of conference the way that they lost last year, like the way that they recovered surprised everybody. So returning 20 out of 22 starters for a team that was better than everyone thought it should be, some of it's regression to the mean. And then I asked somebody else, I'm like, how do you fix not being able to tackle in season? Because I know Jaheim Brown broke 11 tackles in one game. They had 3 missed tackles on the final play where BYU beat them on the final drive. And it was going into that Arizona State game, and Cam Scatterby was really hard to tackle anyway. So I was like, how do you fix tackling in season? And this is somebody who had played in the NFL before, and they were like, oh, you don't.
You don't.
Yeah. You actually, it's only an off-season thing. It's only a mentality thing. You can't just tell people who don't tackle to tackle that. Otherwise, everyone would just do that. And so, the way, and you go back even before that, the way Derek Mason left, right? There's just certain things over time. The OANN t-shirt and pretending he didn't know what it was.
I literally had that picture pulled up and I just exited out of it because I was like, I don't feel like we're going to bring that up.
Yeah, but
nope, we brought it up.
But this week, Mike Gundy calling everybody who's mad a bunch of broke bitches.
Yeah.
Like he said, these are people who can't pay their bills. In the same sentence, you just talked about how they were complaining about not being able to pay their NIL bills.
Yeah, whenever NIL really hit, there were some schools like Texas Tech, very fortunately, jumped right in front of it and was very proactive at getting NIL going within the Texas Tech athletics department. And then you had others like Dabo Sweeney and Clemson who were just like, nah, we don't need that. And Mike Gundy was definitely one of them. And now, Clemson kind of found a way to bounce back, I think, because they're almost a blue blood. Oklahoma State just, I don't think they're going to recover from that at all, at least not with Gundy.
Well, also, let's be real. I mean, the ACC is not as competitive of a conference as the Big 12 is. It's just not, right?
Right.
That makes a difference.
I mean, SMU is like making a run to win that conference, and that says everything you need to know.
I mean, yeah, it does.
SMU paid $200 million to come punch you and all your friends in the mouth.
Just the worst. The worst, man. Okay, let's finish this
Huge
sucker off.
Rothstein.
We have the return of the Holy War, and it is about as climactic as a moist fart. I don't know why this is a 3.5-point line, because, I mean, unless Zach Wilson's little brother suddenly, has gotten like his can of spinach and he's going to be some kind of superhero. I mean, yeah, would it be the most Big 12 thing ever if Utah managed to upset him? Sure. Right. It's a rivalry game. Anything can happen. But BYU, I feel like, is just in a whole separate class than Utah. I'm excited to watch the Holy War, but I don't see it as being particularly exciting, even if it is at 9:15. Boys, what do you think?
I mean, I'm kind of bummed that Utah didn't hold up their end of the bargain to make this a top 10 on top 10 matchup like I think most people thought it would be.
Yeah, Chuck Wagons.
Man. But I think if it was at Laval Edwards, I think this would be a blowout for BYU. I do think there's a chance for some Big 12-ness to happen because it is at Rice-Eccles and it'll be a home game for Utah. And you can imagine Utah fans, players, whoever, like if there's going to be a season where they win one game, it's going to have to be the BYU game. They're going to that's their Super Bowl now. As much as I'm sure they hate that term. that's the game that they've got circled that they're going to put everything that they have on.
No doubt. No doubt.
Yeah, and both teams are coming off of bye weeks too. So they both had time to prepare for this. There was 2 full weeks of Twitter hate tweeting, which was absolutely hilarious to watch. I don't think I've ever seen as many hate tweets from Mormons in my entire life. But that was definitely something that I absolutely loved.
You guys are just silly.
Yeah, it there's hate week, and then there's hate week, and they never crossed that line. It was just like, oh, Utah fans drink Coke with ice, and I'm like, what kind of insult is that? Like, I was like, it's hilarious, but it was just so weird. I just don't think that Utah is quite there yet. They should have passed off on the Cam Rising era 3 years ago. They should have developed another quarterback that should have been, in that junior, senior class to where Wilson could have sat out, redshirted his freshman year, learned the entire offense for a year, kind of developed underneath a more veteran presence before he got thrown into this. I think he's athletic. I think he's decent, but I don't quite think he's start day one freshman. I personally also absolutely love that Utah is falling flat on their face. I really don't see Utah getting anywhere near this. And from what I've been reading on Utah Twitter, now that you can read people that blocked you tweets, is that Utah Twitter is an absolute mess. They are genuinely pissed that they might not even make a bowl game this season. And I am here for it, and I love it.
Couldn't happen to a nicer group of folks.
Right? Man, I love this new unblocked feature.
It's funny because, y'all are just now, I mean, this does not go for Ralph because he spent time in the Pac-12 with them, but I just love everyone just now figuring out how much Utah sucks as a former Mountain West fan, right? I'm like, oh, I've been hating these guys, right? It's just nice to see everyone else coming into the tent, right? And understanding how terrible Utah fans are. Ralph, take us home. What do you think about this game?
I had a bunch of Utah fans whenever BYU joined the conference tweet at me that man, you guys they seem nice, but you guys are going to hate them. They're just terrible people, and that could not have been more wrong.
I was going to say polar opposite.
Yeah.
Oh man!
Ralph, what do you think about
this? I tell you what, if you're not seeing enough hate, I think you're following the wrong accounts, because I can point you in the direction of there's nobody is better at getting under Utah Twitter skin than BYU fans, and it's genuinely one of the more vicious rivalries. It's really, this game hadn't been played in 3 years, so it's kind of built up. And if I told you before the season, one of these teams is coming in 8-0, ranked top 10, elite defensive unit. And another one is 105th ranked offense, can't get their quarterback situation figured out. Definitely all of us before the season would have had this flipped. But Sataki, he's gotten it. I don't think he was on the hot seat going into the season, but he's gotten it figured out. They brought in 3 quarterbacks that could play, and Jake Retzlaff is, he's holding the other 2 off. And they kind of do the offense by committee thing, but defensively, I mean, and just against the pass, I think they're holding opponents to 52% completion this year. Over the course of a whole year, that is insane. And so if Utah wants to win this game, they're going to have to run. The only teams that have given BYU trouble this year had quarterbacks that got out of the pocket and ran. And when Oklahoma State took them to the wire, that was Garrett Rangel that did most of that. It wasn't even Alan Bowman. And so can Isaac Wilson run? We're going to find out. But the Utah thing, it doesn't make sense. Whole offensive line, 6'5", 310 or better. Brent Keith, pass catching tight end out there. Dorian Singer gives them a threat at receiver that they haven't had in forever. Their running back, Micah Bernard's been there forever. He's 23 years old, and yet they can't get it together offensively. However, they are still on defense. They're still as vicious as ever. I would put Utah's defense is the number 1 unit in this, and their offense is number 6 behind both special teams. I think that defense gives them a chance. I think playing in Salt Lake gives them a chance, and I'm calling my shot here. I think Utah ruins BYU's season.
Wow.
And that's really the only thing they have to look forward to. So But yeah, I'm going with the Utes.
We're sending you back to the Pac-12.
Please.
I mean, I kind of hate it, but I kind of agree. I mean, if BYU is going to lose a game this year, it's going to be at Utah.
Yeah, that's the one. Like, I was actually kind of concerned for him going into a couple weeks ago. Is this specific one trap game?
Yeah. And then the college football playoff committee will think long and hard of how can we exclude the Big 12 altogether.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's what I hate, because looking at these rankings, if BYU loses, they're going to take SMU with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what they should.
I'd be okay with that.
Silver lining.
Yeah.
SMU's
a Power 4 team. Got it?
Okay.
Got it.
So you've sold me, Rob. I'm rooting for Utah.
Wow, it's really the lesser of two. I'm learning about you guys. The lesser Utah being the lesser of two evils must mean you hate SMU quite a bit.
So this is one of the beautiful things about the Big 12 is, everybody hates everybody. And I find myself so rarely rooting for teams out of conference solidarity. I'm just like, nah, screw them. I hope they lose, but it's great. It's more fun that way, right? It's more fun to hate.
I actually kind of liked SMU, and I was kind of hoping that they would end up in the conference somehow during the first round of realignment. And then I actually met SMU fans, and now I can't even begin to hate them enough.
Yeah.
Well, did you see what their AD? Did you see what their AD and their big donor said about the Big 12 not letting them in?
No.
He said, like, hey, if the Texas teams are afraid of us, I don't blame them. They're right to be afraid.
Wow, that's almost as bad of a fumble as the Memphis one. Because FedEx was putting up the money to get Memphis into the Big 12, and Big 12 told him no 3 times.
I mean, the thing that chaps my butt about it is it's like, TCU and SMU both got left out of the Big Boys Club at the same time, right? We both wandered in the wilderness. But the difference is TCU started winning, started investing in football, and actually earned their way into a big conference, right? SMU did not. And they just bought their way in. That's what
they wrote a check.
Right? It's like, no, you don't belong. You haven't done anything to belong. Now you're winning. Congratulations, right? But
can we also say that it's kind of weird that it took SMU this long in the day and age of NIL to get good, because they were so good at pre-NIL when it was illegal?
Yeah.
Them, Arkansas, and Texas. Are you kidding me? Like, all 3 should have been perfected the NIL thing before it became legal. And then once it's legal, it's taking you this long to figure it out. Like,
I mean, at this point, all they should have had to have done is just open the books.
Exactly.
Just admit to what they were doing.
Well, here's our current payroll.
Yeah.
Now they just make it public.
Exactly. Well, thanks y'all for hanging out. Thanks everyone for making us a part of your election Tuesday night. Fun show. Gentlemen, tell the folks where they can find you, where they can follow you, where they can read your stuff, all of that. Plug whatever you want to plug. Go ahead, Brownie.
At Future Burner on Twitter. Wide Right Natty Lights website. You can always find me. We also have our Discord linked in the Twitter page as well. Come join us. All fans are welcome. You don't have to be Iowa State or Big 12. We have 10-12 chat in there too. That's always blasting off. And honestly, the game threads are emotional roller coasters for everybody. So if you want to see Iowa State meltdown any day, come join us.
Well, Flatland_sports on Twitter. That's pretty much it for me. Just follow me. I live for the trash talk and everything Texas Tech and Big 12 related. And if you're in the Lubbock area and you need a realtor, Christopher Johnston at Bold Street Real Estate. I'm your guy. Give me a call or just DM me.
And I'm just chronically online, so if you're on the internet, I am too.
There you go.
Wonderful. Please do subscribe to the show if you haven't already. It's at Big 12 BOCFB. There it is right there. Also, check out, we're unveiling team channels for all of the Big 12 teams. So look for your team. I guarantee you can find them. Follow me on Twitter at Clint_Foster55 and my personal YouTube channel at Clint Foster Comedy. Y'all have a peaceful election night. Remember, God's in control. Okay, it's gonna be all right. We're gonna wake up in the morning. It's gonna be just fine, no matter what happens. I
Actions
love
have
y'all.
consequences.
Until next time, I hope your team wins and go Big 12. See you around.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, fun show, y'all. See if the stream is gonna actually end.